Oh, it's on the wrong side. Hello. 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 Welcome. Good morning. Today I'm going to be talking about symbiosis on land and sea, as you can see. And I've been mentioning symbiosis in a lot of lectures. As you know by now, probably there are three kinds of symbiosis that scientists used to talk about. Actually, there are four. I'm going to sneak the fourth one in. The first is, where's the little red dot? Mutualism. It's a relationship between two organisms that's mutually beneficial to both of them, mutually. In this case, the cattle egret who's riding along on the cattle getting a meal, and the cattle who's getting cleaned. In this case, it's the moray eel with the wrasse cleaner fish in here. And you can see, I'll talk more about cleaner fish. There's wrasse or cleaner fish. There's a bunch of different kinds of cleaner fish. There are cleaner shrimp. And a lot of times they'll hang out with the fish and clean it, but there's other times you can find cleaning stations where the shrimp or the fish just hang out, and fish who need a good dentist will come by and go, fish come in and they'll clean. So they get a meal, and this guy gets a free dental exam with no drilling or anything. No laughing gas either, though. Uh, then there is commensalism, sitting together at a table. This is where one organism benefits and the other, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a wash for them. And here you have an example of shadow feeding. This trumpet fish, who's a pescador, a fish eater, when fish see this silhouette, they think, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I might be dinner or lunch or a breakfast snack. But if he hides behind this harmless herbivore fish, like a shadow, they don't see him and he can pop out and eat them. Here he is concealing himself as a piece of seaweed or a coral. It's hard to tell what this is exactly, but squid will also do this. It's a good way to both escape prey and to conceal yourself and look for prey. Then there's parasitism. This is an example of parasitism that is kind of ugly looking, actually. This is a cowbird, and cowbirds lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and then they hatch. They are much bigger, usually, than the birds whose nests they're in. And the birds right here, baby birds, have what's called a flange. It's that yellow, red, extra tissue. And a parent, a mom usually, but sometimes both parents, are sort of programmed. They see that flange gaping open at them and they think, this needs to be fed. And they go out and get food to feed it. And they will work themselves to the bone. I guess you can say that about a bird. A bird has bones. Work themselves to the bird bone to get food for this baby. Well, in this case, the baby's huge, and the flange is much bigger than the other bird's flange, than its own children's phalanges. And birds are programmed to, I say program, I don't know if it's a program or what it is, but basically if a bird has 3 chicks, it will feed the biggest one and the strongest one. And maybe if there's enough food, the other 2. If it's got a nest of 6, usually the 2 youngest are going to be kicked out. They're not going to get enough food. It's not this let's raise as many kids as we can. It's let's raise the strongest kid. And this cowbird chick also has a rather unpleasant habit of pushing the other chicks out of the nest when the parent's off looking for food. So usually any bird unlucky enough to have a cowbird nest will end up only with the cowbird chick, and it will end up into this monster chick that keeps needing to be fed. It seems kind of like a horror movie to me. Then there's amensalism. Amensalism is a term that you will never ever hear used and is rather worthless, I think, but it is one of the symbiotic terms, and it means a relationship where one party is a wash, it isn't affected, and the other party is harmed. And The best example is a plant that casts a lot of shade over the ground and so dwarfs other plants, doesn't let plant get life. The one that's casting the shade, it's not affected. The one that's not getting enough sun, it's damaged. This is actually a eucalyptus tree, and eucalypts have a habit of sort of poisoning, you could say, the ground around them for other plants so they don't have competition. But a lot of trees will actually have chemicals in their roots that will prevent sometimes all other plants from growing, but at least their own kind from growing. So they aren't going to have any direct competition with their siblings, kind of like lawyers. And here we have one of the downsides to symbiotic relationship. This poor rhinoceros and his cleaning birds are writing him saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" Aha. Now we go back to photosynthesis. There is a reason I'm going back. I'm actually going to lead you down the garden path on a very interesting story. So I'm going to start with a quick photosynthesis. I talked about it yesterday, how the plant has chloroplasts in its cell, how it takes sunlight and carbon dioxide, and through this amazing process in photosynthetic cells called chloroplasts, it's able to use all these different light rays to make sugar. Incredible. It doesn't use green usually. It throws the green back at you, which is why you see this leaf as green. Here are chloroplasts. They're tremendous energy producers. I mean, if we could do that, we could just sit out in the sun and we wouldn't have to keep running upstairs for chocolate cake. Now I'm going to show you lichen. Lichen, you've all seen lichen probably. It grows on rocks. It grows on bark of trees. You can see it almost anywhere. It's amazing. It grows in very cold climates, very warm climates, and it looks almost like a crust. This guy says it looks like a hard pie stuck to a rock. I don't know about the pie bit. But if you were to cut it open, it would have an upper layer of, let's see if this is what I want, fungus, and a inner layer of algae and a lower layer of fungus. Basically, the fungus is there as a hard protector coat, so it can grow almost anywhere. And the inner algae, this inner working right here, this inner mesh, is providing food. Algae it's what's in coral, it's in a lot of things, and it actually photosynthesizes and provides food, while in this case, this provides protection. The fungus provides protection. And I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to go back here. This is actually a coral fungus, and you can see it looks a lot like a coral. This is a shell fungus, and this is an Amanita muscara, the famous toadstool, and I'm going to tell you a long story about that in a few minutes, but I want to continue the rest of this story first. So here we have algae. Now algae, this car is actually powered by algae. Algae it's just being tapped. These are big energy producers. They are like networks, and they're growing algae on there and using its tremendous energy to power certain buildings in here. This is a new science, basically. Here's the algae cells. This guy has an algae mohawk. I don't know if it's actually helping photosynthesize him. So, here we have the cross section. We've got lichen, we've got the algae, we've got the fungus in here producing a lot of food, and we've got the protection. I'm just checking to be sure I know. Yes, this is my next. Well, who came up with this? Who started looking through microscopes at lichen saying, what's going on here? This grows anywhere. This doesn't make any sense. And now I get to Peter Rabbit. Of course, Peter Rabbit. That makes perfect sense. Actually, Beatrix Potter, the woman who wrote Peter Rabbit, she was born in 1866, and she was born to a fairly wealthy family in England, grew up in a big house in the English countryside. Her parents would invite artists and scientists, they were kind of artistic and scientific themselves, to come over, and she would listen to all the things. Her brother, her older brother, lived with her too, and they would go roaming around in the English countryside, and she was fascinated by nature. She was also an extremely skilled artist. This is one of her drawings, her botanical drawings of lichen. She was actually an amazing botanist, and she was the one who discovered that lichen was algae and fungus. So she went to the big scientific society in England. Uh, the Linnaean Society. Linnaean is named after the Swedish botanist who came up with the idea of scientific nomenclature, like Homo sapien, Homo erectus, all those classifications. That's who he came up with. And so she goes to the society and she says, "Here are my drawings, here's my paper, can I present it?" And they said, "You're a girl. You got cooties. No way." Probably not the cooties. But they said, "You're a woman. Sorry, you're not welcome here." And so she thought about it and decided to start writing children's books. And she wrote Peter Rabbit and the Tale of the Tailor Mouse, and became very famous worldwide. Her books are translated everywhere. And eventually she bought a lot of land, and when she died, she left this 4,000 acre piece of land in the English countryside to the British Trust. Um, Also, on a slightly amusing note for me, and I think, and I'm not sure the year exactly, but something like 1974, the Linnaean Society actually offered her an apology. Said, "Sorry, we were wrong. You were right about lichen. We should have recognized you." Shucks. So now I'm going back to Amanita muscaria. This is an amazing mushroom. It's in a family of very deadly poison mushrooms, but also hallucinogenic mushrooms. Because the way most hallucinogenic mushrooms work is they poison you a little. Not enough to kill you, but enough to make you see visions and your body's reacting. Just like if you starve yourself, like the vision quests a lot of Native Americans would go on where they wouldn't eat or drink water, your body's kind of breaking down and it starts seeing things that aren't necessarily there. Though maybe they're there just in another dimension and we usually can't see them. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. However, this will make you see visions. And this grows in a huge variety of landscapes. It grows in the south where it's really muggy. It also grows up in Inuit country where it's very, very cold. And it is the origin of Santa Claus. What, you're saying? How can that be? The origin of Santa Claus. It's a mushroom. Well, notice that it's red and white. Up in Inuit country, reindeers would eat these mushrooms and they would have visions and they would begin dancing around. There are tales of these dancing reindeer under the full moon because they had eaten this mushroom. As I say, it's very toxic. It will make you sick, but when the mushroom toxin passes through the body, either reindeer or human, the toxin comes out in the urine without the toxin. So if you drink reindeer's urine, you will get high without getting sick. Shaman would also eat these and have visions that they would tell the people, and the shaman's urine would also pass through. And so if you drank the shaman's urine, you would have visions without getting sick. The shaman would go out collecting this mushroom. They'd be wearing furry clothes, red, like furry clothes, and they had some red, like vests. They had long black boots, and what do you call it? The houses were built like this, right? These round houses to keep in the major amount of warmth with a little hole to let the smoke out of the house. So they would go collect the mushrooms. They would climb in the top of the roof so as not to let any cold out. And they would hang these mushrooms around the fire to dry. And that is Santa Claus coming through the chimney and the dancing reindeers. So now, next time you sit around getting ready for Christmas, you can say, "You want to hear how Father Christmas came to be?" Okay, mutualism. What I'm going to do with this is go on about mutualism, then commensalism, parasitism, etc. So here we have some animals. I talked a lot about coral yesterday. I'm not going to go into a lot, except these are animals that use photosynthesis. They actually have plant chloroplasts inside them, single-celled algae. Usually what they do not create these algae inside. They eat the algae, and the algae stays inside them, and they keep it, and it still produces sunlight for them. So this is a kind of water slug. I think it's really cool because it looks so much like a leaf. This is a land slug, and this slug, it's actually solar powered. It eats the algae, incorporates the algae into its actual system, uses its chloroplasts to create sunlight, and eventually it will stop eating altogether and just let the chloroplasts support it. Here is a photosynthetic cat. It needs to recharge every 4 hours. This is an outside dog. You can see because it's also photosynthesizing. And this is part dog, part plant. Here's one more example of mutualistic photosynthetic. This is photosynthesis. I know, I love this one too. I was like, ah. Another form of mutualism I've talked about, cleaning. This happens on land and at sea. This bird, as you can see, goes into the mouth of this alligator. You can tell it's an alligator because of its teeth rather than a crocodile. And it gets a free meal. This guy doesn't get eaten. Moray eels, like I say, cleaner wrasse. This is a cleaner shrimp. And these cleaner shrimp, like I say, they will hang out at little rocks. If you're snorkeling, if you're diving, and you see something like this, try and hang around because fish will come and you will see them all getting their teeth cleaned. This guy's getting his eye cleaned. This grouper here is also getting his eye cleaned of parasites. This is the little cleaner. Now there's a fish that looks a lot like the cleaner wrasse that is not a cleaner wrasse. It is looking like a cleaner wrasse so it can come in and snatch food from other fishes without getting eaten because they think, oh, it's a cleaner wrasse, I won't eat it. Not a cleaner wrasse. This, however, you can see what happens to a diver who opens his mouth here. The cleaner wrasse will go right in and say, oh my gosh, when was your last checkup? And now we come to Finding Nemo. There are actually 30 species in the clownfish family, and there's a little sort of a black guy with bright blue specks you might have seen if you were. I saw a lot of them. I did see some of these when I was snorkeling around, but I also saw a lot more of the black with the blue specks. But if you can see a little fish that's living in an anemone like this, it's a kind of clownfish. There are two kind of orange clownfish. There's the orange clownfish, and there's also one called the false clownfish. Now, they're really nearly identical, but they're two different species, and if you get close enough, you can count their dorsal spines. One of them, the true clownfish, has 10, and the other one has 11. This doesn't really make any difference, except that the Disney version, which talks about the clownfish, uses in its drawings the false clownfish. And it just seemed like such a Disney thing to do. If you have the true and the false, why not use the false? Finding Nemo is about the heartbreak of a young clownfish who was removed from the wild and put in an aquarium. And this movie caused the demand for clownfish in aquariums to go up 3/4 in the U.S. We can only be happy that freeing Willie didn't have the same effect. It's also about the heartache of a father who's lost not only his wife, but then his young son. The other interesting thing about it is, remember I talked about how most reef fish change sex, and most go from female to male. But a few go from male to female, and the clownfish is one of those few. So if he'd lost his wife, instead of being brokenhearted, he probably would have just changed into a female. Now you can say all the ways Finding Nemo is wrong. Mutualism. This is one of my favorite forms of mutualism. Here you can see the shrimp has got this goby sort of on a harness. That's not untrue. This little shrimp here, the burrowing shrimp, which is very beautiful in color, it is almost blind, however. This fish really can't see. It doesn't have a lot of senses. It would be almost hopeless, but it's very good at digging. So what it does is it digs this little burrow for both itself and this goby, and then the goby will go out and check for predators, see if it's safe to come out and eat, and the shrimp will touch it, keep constant touch with its antenna right here. And so when the goby reacts and says, uh-oh, predator, the shrimp goes back in the hole because he can feel the goby moving around. The goby says, oh, it's okay, and the shrimp comes out and eats too. So he acts as kind of a seeing eye fish. Manna from heaven. Okay, this is a long, fascinating story. You might remember that I talked about aphids, how they went through this parthenogenic cycle. They were females reproducing females, reproducing females. At the end of the summer, a few of them grow wings and turn into males. They have a sexual reproduction cycle. The eggs last over the winter, and then they're born all into females. So that's one cool thing about aphids. Here's another cool thing about aphids. They eat plants, as you know. A lot of them actually don't really harm the plants that much. Like it depends on the kind of aphid. Oleander aphids, those orange ones and green ones, if you just leave them alone, they won't really harm your plant. It's those black aphids that are all yucky. But if you've noticed, if you have aphids on your plants, you might notice that the leaves and the stems look very shiny and sticky. Well, that's honeydew. It's called honeydew. Aphids eat the leaf and they excrete this very, very sweet substance. It is very sweet. If you lick it, you will find that it's very sweet. Yes, I did. I had to. So, ants love this honeydew, and they will, you can see right here, they will actually stroke, you can see it really clearly here, they'll stroke the aphid's stomach. The aphid will excrete the honeydew, and the ants will eat it. Ants will actually, they're called ant cows by some people, and the ants will actually take the aphids underground at night. They have a special little place for them in their nest. Ants are very organized. They have places for everything. They even grow mushrooms, certain kinds of ants. They'll take fungus and they'll water it and they'll grow mushrooms to eat underground. Well, they also have a place where they will take their aphids and they'll keep them down safe and sound at night, and they bring them up in the morning so they can milk them and get honeydew. And ladybugs, both the larvae and the adults, eat aphids, lots of aphids. And so you can see here this ant is giving this ladybug a hard time. Because it's like, well, now you're saying, so what about manna from heaven? I can hear you thinking it. So go backward in time to Moses and the Israelites. They go out into the desert and they're wandering around for 40 years. I think in an area about the size of Palm Springs, actually. Still, they're wandering about. It's kind of like me in the ship. I'm always lost. There are big, big oak trees in the desert. And there are aphids on these oak trees. And the aphids are eating the oak leaves and excreting the honeydew. In the Sinai, it gets very cold at night. So these huge chunks of honeydew freeze. Then it gets hot in the morning, very, very hot, very, very quickly. So it doesn't have a chance to melt. It just unfreezes and clunk, falls, hits the Israelis on the head. They say, wow, look, we're getting fed. Well, the word for the Arabic word for aphid honeydew is manna. Manna esim is a sweet that is made from aphid honeydew. They take the aphid because it's very, very, very sweet. And you can get manna esim if you go today. It's made with aphid honeydew. So manna from heaven is really aphid droppings. The pilot fish. This is another mutualistic relationship that's kind of cool. Pilot fish hang out with sharks, and they're also cleaner fish, but they have this special relationship with sharks. They aren't at cleaning stations. You won't see pilot fish anywhere else but with sharks. And they clean the shark, and they, of course, get the leavings that the shark has eaten, and they get the protection, because nobody wants to mess with a shark, except maybe Steven Spielberg. Um, so it's mutualistic. Certain sailors say that that they have a very close relationship, and when they have captured sharks aboard the ship, that the pilot fish will follow them for 6 weeks and appear distressed. I'm not sure how you can tell if a pilot fish is distressed, but I suppose if it's following a ship, it might be distressed. And here he says he's lost his pilot ship and now he has to follow his GPS. They are being used currently, these symbols, on certain surfboards because they're thinking, well, sharks like pilot fish, so if a surfer has these kind of stripes on a surfboard, the shark won't attack him. I think actually probably it has to do with smell and size and all this, so I'm not sure if it's that efficacious a use of stripes, but can't hurt. Commensalism. Commensalism, sitting together at table, Mensa's table. This is the relationship where one is benefited and one is not affected either way. And here we have a hermit crab. Well, somebody made this shell and either died or outgrew it or whatever reason left the shell, and the hermit crab picks it up and moves in. Obviously, whoever made the shell, not affected. Hermit crab has a place to live. Bromeliads, epiphytes. Epiphyte means air plant. It's a plant that can live on air. It's the epiphytic orchids you're probably familiar with. Bromeliads, those are all plants that basically they live on a little bit of moss and they can live on a tree and get all their nutrition and moisture and water from the air. And so they usually live high on trees in the jungle, and the tree doesn't care one way or the other. It's not a parasite on the tree, but it's also not helping the tree. It's a wash for the tree. These are some of my favorite creatures. They're called designer crabs, and they're a lot of fun. Their saliva is very, very sticky, and they will wander around and they will take seaweed from all over, and they will saliva it and stick it on their back, and then they will be totally hidden. And if you get a designer crab and you give it some like beads or jewels or whatever, it'll stick it all over its back. And you can get this very flashy crab. Commensalism or commensalism. Sea cucumbers. You might have seen these guys when you were snorkeling around, if you were snorkeling. There's a lot of different kinds. They can be black. They can be anywhere from about this big to, I did see one this big once, but that's unusual. They're usually about this big. They look like sort of black brown sausages. Let me see if there's, no, you can't see that. But here is a sea cucumber, and they have remarkable thing they can do. They can extrude their guts. These are their guts. And maybe if you were snorkeling around, you saw like this white thread that looked like this, that was sticky. If you were to touch the white thread, it would retract, because what they do is they extrude their guts, and these have little stingers on them that can sting fish, and then they will suck their guts in with the fish attached. They don't hurt people though. They just feel sticky if you touch them. Yes, I have. And they can also say they want to get into a very small crack. They will sort of liquefy the inside of their stomach lining, stick it out of their body, squeeze their body into a crack, and then they'll stick basically their guts, this white stuff, to the rock so they won't be moved around. It's also known as autotomic process. It's evisceration. They will squeeze their guts out, as you can see. They also can squeeze out a chemical that is toxic. It's like soap for fish. We don't seem to be reactive to it. I've squeezed a lot of cucumbers in my day. If you squeeze them, they will extrude their guts. And you can see it's out here. They have a very strange commensalate, not mutualistic, relationship with a pearlfish. This pearlfish lives inside them, and every night it will swim out of their anus, grab a bite, and swim back into their anus. Pearlfishes, the cucumber does not seem affected by this. The pearlfish gets a place to live, and you can see he's like, look at this interior. You know, everyone's going, ew. Let's hear it, ew. So, thank you. A mensalism, as I say, this is one where one organism is not harmed and the other is harmed. So this is not very common, which is nice because nobody benefits here. But a lot of shade cast by a tree. The tree that casts a shade, not affected one way or the other. Things that want to get sun are affected and can't grow. Parasitism. Ew, yuck. Nobody likes parasites. If you were snorkeling around, you might have seen a lot of fish. These live on fish a lot. Most sea fish have some kind of parasite living on them. Sometimes they actually go into their mouth, and that is a real problem for the fish. That can actually kill a fish. It's not so bad. I mean, they can cause some bone deformity, but it's not horrible for them. This, of course, is a tick. This is a flea. And this is, I don't know if you remember, I talked about parasitoid wasps. When a caterpillar is eating a plant, the plant says, oh my gosh, I'm being eaten. It sends hormones out into the air, pheromones out into the air. And the parasitoid wasp is flying around and it says, I hear a plant calling help, help. I'm going to help it. Parasitoid wasp to the rescue goes, lays eggs on the caterpillar, and then they mature and eat the caterpillar from the inside out. Kind of a disgusting superhero quality if you ask me. More parasites. Mosquito, as we all know. And remember I said that only the female mosquito bites because she's the one that needs the blood to rear her young. This is true of a lot of biting insects. Not all, but a lot of biting insects. It's the female only that bites because she needs the blood to raise her young. I know the guys are all like, yeah, I've dated women like that. Mistletoe. Mistletoe is interesting. Mistletoe is a parasite. And early people saw these, grim winter landscape, no leaves, no nothing. The only thing that's green is mistletoe. So they're like, mistletoe, let's put it up and kiss people beneath it because it must be green and a symbol of life. Well, actually, it's only green because it's sucking all the energy out of the tree. Like my first boyfriend. It has a long, interesting history, however. Mistletoe is a parasite. It rarely kills its host tree, but it can kill its host tree. However, it is very important in a good environment. Juniper trees produce more berries if they have mistletoe growing on it. Why? Because birds like mistletoe. Birds like these little white berries that you see. They like to eat them. They are toxic to people. Do not go eating that mistletoe you're kissing under. But they are not toxic, and a lot of animals like them. Birds like them, and birds, of course, eat them, digest them, go over to another tree, poop them out, and hence the name comes from the Anglo-Saxon name mistle is for dung, and tan is for twig. So mistletoe really meant like dung on a twig. And birds will also nest in these. They were called witches' brooms, these bit of greenery in the tree. But life explodes where there's more berries on the juniper because there are more birds that are spreading berries. So it's kind of this parasite that's actually good for the environment. It also has an amazing history in literature. The Aeneas, the Trojan hero, he is told by his father he should go to the afterworld to find out the future, and he has no money to pay the guy who's guarding the gates of the afterworld. So he breaks off a twig of mistletoe, and it turns into the golden bough. The golden bough in literature is actually mistletoe. Uh, the god Baldar, the ancient, god Baldar, whose mother was Friggin. Friggin has him. She gets promises from everything, animate and inanimate. She says, "Do not kill my son." Everybody loves him. It's true. Everybody loves him except Loki, the evil trickster god. And she doesn't get, however, a promise from the mistletoe, because the mistletoe is too young to give a promise. And so he manages to, Loki manages to make an arrow, gets the blind brother of Baldar to throw it at him as kind of a good joke, and it kills his brother, and, that then there's more god stuff, and they get angry at each other, and bad things happen. So now you know all the mistletoe facts. Okay, and a quick sort of a review. Commensalism, shadow feeding, I told you about. This is one of my favorite examples. I love shadow feeding. Mutualism, nuclear hunting. This is called nuclear hunting. It's when a number of different species of fish get together and they go hunting together. And this happens quite a bit, and it's fascinating because they can each do different things. You get somebody like a moray eel here who can go into the cracks, and he can either bite the fish or drive them out, and then this fish can attack them, and then they all have a meal. So here these three guys are nuclear hunting. And here we have an example of Steven Spielberg on Jaws. This is what we call parasitism. And let me see. Okay, just checking to see what is next and what my time is like. Good. Here is some more examples of parasitism. This is doctors. He's like, parasite job hunting. What kind of openings do you have? Here's the gorilla compliments. May I say your parasites are especially delicious tonight. And here's the evolution of parasites, from tapeworm to flea to leech to vampire bat to banker. Thank you very much. And thank you. And I do have a few minutes for questions.